All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our 2025 preview and prediction for the Duke Blue Devils. Looking at this coaching staff, all these guys return for their second year. Manny Diaz will be the lead man. Jonathan Brewer, second year in role as offensive coordinator, and Jonathan Packey will be the defensive coordinator. Pretty good offseason. Went to the portal, had some key contributors, and then 30th ranked high school class for Duke is pretty impressive. 9-4 last year, significantly overexceeded expectations. They ended up losing in the Gator Bowl, though, but by all means, that was a phenomenal season. Looking at the Duke offense, this is a group that obviously spent a lot of money to go out and get a new quarterback in Darian Mensah. This is a guy I thought was very impressive for Tulane last year. It was a pretty packed quarterback room for him to go out there as a young player and win that job. I thought spoke volumes to what his upside potentially is. A guy who showcases good poise, a really impressive arm, nice feet. The ability to step into throws really stands out. I think he has a great feel for the pocket. He has the speed to burn you with scrambles as well. At 6'3", 200, he can work out of the gun or under center, so he has that versatility in his game. I think Mensah, it's bold going out and paying that kind of money for them, especially since Malik Murphy was pretty solid last year, Nick. I thought he could have been pretty good in 2025. He's now at Oregon State. Mensah comes in. He's going to be here for a couple of seasons, and I'm excited to see how this works out.
I thought Duke was quite good in their first season of the Manny Diaz era. 9-4 is a pretty respectable record. I thought the quarterback play with Malik Murphy was pretty solid as well. I feel like he could have been the starter as well. I'm going to agree with you there. When you look at their schedule last year, 2 of their losses were extremely close. They lost at Georgia Tech by 10 points and lost at home to SMU in overtime by a point. The other losses, at Miami, they got blown out in that game. That was a tough matchup. And then the bowl game against Ole Miss, I'm not going to even look at that because, they had a ton of opt-outs, whatever, Mulligan, call it there. But in the regular season, they played 2 really close games, and they could have played a little bit better than Miami game to cut the score as well. So this was a very talented Duke team last year in Manny Diaz's first season. And now he's got himself a bona fide superstar in the making at quarterback. I love what Darian Mensah can do. 6'3", 205. I think he's a really solid, accurate quarterback in the pocket. 16% comp rate last year. 2,700 yards passing, 22 touchdowns to 6 picks. He also had 132 yards rushing and a touchdown. Not really a big part of his game, but occasionally in the red zone or occasionally on third down it may be used. I think he's solid. He can stand in the pocket, sling the ball here. This wide receiving core that we're going to talk about in a second, they've added some pieces that can help him as well to try and smooth things out during year one. Yes, it's a big jump coming from Tulane to Duke, but I think Mensah is a very talented quarterback that will only develop better as time goes on. I think he'll be really solid in this system. I think it was a really good get out of the portal. I think it'll be worth the money they paid him.
They do lose some pretty good receivers. Jordan Moore, Eli Pancol were tremendous for them. One of the better, more underrated duos in the country. Like you said, they went to the portal, had some nice players. Cooper Barkay comes over after 1,000-plus yards and 11 scores for Harvard. Andrell Anthony missed last year, but had some impressive games back in 2023 for Oklahoma. Shamar Hagan's a good veteran that has 2 straight 400-plus yard seasons in his career. Also had a kick return TD in the bowl game, so I think you got some nice players here. And then Q-Sean Brown, he was very impressive in his time out of the slot. 5'8", 165, 445 yards, only 1 drop as the third leading pass catcher in his freshman season. He's going to be a breakout star in this conference. Chase Tyler, redshirt freshman, didn't see the field much last year. Also got 2 incoming 3-stars. They returned Jake Taylor, saw nearly 500 snaps at tight end. He was mainly a blocker, though, but then he didn't step up in terms of pass-catching duties. I don't think this is bad here, Nick. Like last year, they had a pretty good receiving core, and I think with what they added in the portal and Brown's potential emergence, I think they got a nice trio.
Yeah, I like the trio they have here that's certainly developing. I think when you bring in Barkey from Harvard, who was really strong, a Mater Dei high school graduate, going over to Harvard, playing really good football there, entering the portal, going to an equally strong school in terms of academics in Duke. I think he was a really solid add, a guy that obviously has a high IQ in terms of football and potentially in terms of off the field as well. I think, Anthony coming over, Andre Anthony that is coming over from Oklahoma was a really solid add. He had 430 yards receiving, 16 yards for grab, and a score in 2023. I think that's a guy you can certainly rely on to be really solid for your team. I like the 2 players they return as well. I think Brown is a phenomenal player, 445, 10.9 yards per grab, 2 scores. He was really solid. Shamar Hagan's 413, 8.8 yards per grab. Certainly want to improve that average a little bit, but 3 touchdowns from him as well. Jake Taylor, I think, could be a really solid tight end when things are all said and done. They also added Landon King, a tight end from Utah, who had a couple grabs last year, had a decent year at Auburn prior to that as well, a couple touchdowns, so he'll find a way to fight for some reps as well. This is not a terrible unit. They added some interesting freshmen as well. Jeremiah Little is a guy they're high on. Javion Solomon as well is a guy they're high on. Chase Tyler returns, who's hoping to get some reps as well. So a young, inexperienced unit certainly, but a unit I think that can improve throughout the season and end up being a high-impact unit once it's all said and done.
Now you look at their running back room. It was a pretty stacked group the last couple of seasons for Duke. And even though they had that last year, they still struggled significantly, 128th nationally running the football. I mean, they were just as poor as it comes, especially in conference play. They only had one game all year of over 150-plus yards. I mean, even against a lower-tier school like Elon, they only had 59 yards against them. So they were as bad as it gets, Nick. And I think they can certainly get back to rumbling a little bit more now that Jaquez Moore, who was hurt most of last year, is back, productive throughout his career. I think he's been a pretty good player, 5'10", 205 pounds. Peyton Jones brings a lot of versatility to the table, being used in the return game. Made some big plays as a returner and a pass catcher. Anderson Castle, 6', 225, spent 5 years at App State. Didn't really do much. The room's not as deep as last year. I think this is a nice 1-2 punch in Moore and Jones, though. Of course, we'll talk about the offensive line, who was great in pass protection, but in terms of clearing the path for the run game, they were just abysmal.
This team could not run the ball last year, and it was a big liability and certainly held them back to getting those key wins over Georgia Tech and SMU. That could have really flipped the script and made this team a more impressive team once it was all said and done. Getting Moore back is a really good return. He was solid when he was playing previously for this team. Certainly in 2023, he had a really good campaign. Peyton Jones was solid at times as well, over 300 yards rushing and 3 scores last year. He's a big asset to have. They add Castle from App State as well, who I think is an interesting ad who could potentially find a way to get involved. They have a freshman, Nate Shepard, they're high on as well for down the depth chart. So the run game should improve slightly this year. The O-line is going to be really a strength for this team. We'll talk about that in 1 second. But you got to find a way to better, right? 128th in the nation just is unacceptable for Duke at this moment in time if they want to have aspirations of competing for an ACC title.
Now you look at the Blue Devils' offensive line, a group that does return 4 guys up front. Left tackle, Bruno Fina. He's been one of the worst pass blockers in college football for a long time now. Maybe in his third year as a starter can lead to some sizable advances. I just have not seen it at this point. Micah Sakaya started 2 games late in the year, is pretty solid. He's going to slot in at left guard at 6'5", 325. Center's going to remain in the hands of Matt Craycraft, who was really impressive, especially in pass protection. You have Justin Pickett, who's back at right guard. He's 6'7", 317, being even better in pass blocking. And then you have one of the top right tackles in the country in Brian Parker, who was better than both of those guys, giving up no sacks and nearly 900 reps. I think Duke is very happy with this offensive line. Again, they were exceptional in pass protection. They didn't go to the portal for any help, so I think they're confident in the group that they have. And again, they were poor in the run game, but if Fina can find a pulse, they're going to be one of the top groups in the country, in my opinion. It's going to be hard to take a sizable leap like that, Nick, from 128th to being a top 80 rushing attack, but I think Duke can do it. And their quarterback, Mensah, he's not going to hit the ground much this year.
This is a really strong offensive line. I think Fina will improve on the left side. The right side here is absolutely incredible. Craycraft at center is a phenomenal player. Pickett, Parker are 2 incredible assets on the right side. They added Jordan Larson from South Dakota, who may fight for that left guard position here. That the left side is a little concerning, but overall, this is a very strong offensive line. That is a really big physical unit here. If this run game's going to improve, the O-line's got to be better here in clearing some pathways and setting things up for them here. Having one of the best O-lines in the conference, and the nation as well, is a really big thing for your team here. I like what they have. I like the continuity, returning 4 starters that are all really reliable. This offensive line certainly bodes well for Duke this year.
Looking at the offensive verdict, Duke is probably feeling very confident in its offense this year as the 4 returnees up front with the quarterback they paid a lot of money to get in the portal, and a solid group of weapons gears them up to do damage. They had a good passing attack last year, averaged nearly 30 a game despite being one-dimensional. I think they indeed hit that number this year and cracked top 60 in yards per game. I'm still going to go with just a B, because that run game still is very worrisome. And of course, the depth in the receiving group is not all that ideal, and it's just not a very explosive offense at the end of the day. So I'm going to go with a B, which I think is still a fair grade. I think they can eventually work themselves up to a B+, Nick, which I think is going to be the overall ceiling.
I think a B is a very fair grade right now. This is an offense that has a lot of question marks, has a lot of interesting pieces that could certainly do well. I think Darian Mensah will plug in and be just fine here. I like what they added out of the portal, but still some question marks there with your top 2 guys in Barkey and Anthony coming in and really having a point to prove. I love the O-line. The O-line's a very physically strong unit. I think it will be really dominant. The running back room, I'm a little concerned about some of the depth, but getting more back and hopefully fully healthy should be really solid for this offense as well. They got to improve running the ball. That's certainly the biggest point here. They got to improve that points per game total as well. 26.3 is probably not close to where they want to be at. They probably need to be in that 29 to 30 points per game range. Can they get there? I think that's certainly a high, lofty expectation. I like some of the pieces here. Curious to see what type of explosive ability Mensah adds through the air and what this offense can do as it progresses throughout the season.
Now we move to the defensive side of the ball for Duke. This is a group that returns 6 starters, including both their starting defensive ends. They were highly productive. Wesley Williams, 13.5 TFL. He was inconsistent versus the run, but proved to be a great pass rusher. Vinny Anthony brings plenty of tenacity off the edge. He was also very large sum when it comes to putting up numbers on that stat sheet. Tyson Reed, Kevin O'Connor's both got on the field, but neither went over 100 snaps. Now you look at the interior defensive line. They're going to get back Aaron Hall, who was really good, 290-pound pass rusher. He also had 8 tackles for loss. He added Josiah Green, who was a good 280-pound run defender in 3 years at Dartmouth. David Anderson and Preston Watson both played 150-plus snaps last year. Neither were all that good, though. I think this group is pretty solid. They obviously on the 2 deep, I think have plenty of experience. They have 2 great guys coming off the edge who are going to continue to be great for them. I think the interior under Manny Diaz could take some steps forward this year. What do you think of the defensive line for Duke?
Yeah, I like the defensive line. I think it's a really good start. Wesley Williams obviously is a big key leader for this team. 48 total tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups. He was a big freak of nature for this team. He was really good. Aaron Hall was solid as well. 41 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. I want to see more consistency out of Williams and Hall, but 2 really good players. Vincent Anthony was solid for this team as well. 25 total tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. I mean, you're looking at double-digit sacks returning from those guys, well over 30 tackles for loss between those 3 guys as well. So that's a really solid production to get back. David Anderson, 13 tackles for loss, 13 total tackles, that is 2 tackles for loss, 1 sack, I beg your pardon. And then Kevin O'Connell had 8 total tackles, a tackle for loss as well. I think Green coming over from Dartmouth could be a really big, high-impact player as well. He should slot in on that right defensive tackle position. Good some experience there. Tayshawn Reed, Preston Watson are 2 younger players they're hoping can develop and be strong this year as well. I think this defensive line profiles out to be one of the better ones in the conference. A really strong unit overall.
Now we move to the middle of this defense. Trey Freeman, he's coming back after seeing nearly 700 snaps last year. He was a very good run defender. He was pretty good in coverage as well. So overall, he was a nice, well-rounded player. Nick Morris, he got hurt in week 1, which costed them a crucial player. He'll be back this year and inserted into the starting lineup after having 61 tackles back in 2023. Luke Murgott and Kendall Johnson played only 70-plus snaps each last year. Bradley Gompers, he's actually an incoming top 100 recruit. He was 3rd-rated tight end. He's going to move the linebacker, a spot he played very well in high school as well. How crazy is that, Nick? I don't think I've ever seen a guy who's top 5 at a position that's recruited, other than, of course, an athlete position, switch as soon as he arrives on campus, and they're going to put him into this rotation. That's very interesting, and I'm kind of excited to see how that works out. I'm going to write that one down on my notepad to pay attention to throughout the year. Bradley Gompers.
Yeah, it's a guy I'm certainly keeping an eye on. He's listed as number 24 right now on my depth chart. Keep an eye on him he's number 24 throughout the season. He's a guy that could be a really interesting, high-impact player. I like the size and speed on him. A very odd conversion. You don't really see a lot of tight ends to linebackers here, but a guy, at 6'5", 210, he could really be a solid, hard-hitting linebacker, a very intriguing move there by the coaching staff. They must see something in him that they like. In terms of your traditional linebackers that were already on the roster, you look at Trey Freeman. I think he was solid last year, 67 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 picks, 2 pass breakups. He's a solid coverage asset, really solid against the run at times as well. Luke Murgott, 14 total tackles last year. He's got to improve his game, as does Kendall Johnson, who had only 12 total tackles last year. So those 2 guys got to find a way to step up. Getting Nick Morris back, who was a very key contributor for them 2 seasons ago, is obviously something very nice to see if you're a Duke fan. Want to see how he progresses and recovers from his injury.
Yeah, 24/7 Sports does have him listed as an athlete, but a couple of other websites had him at tight end, so maybe clear that up a little bit. But looking at the secondary, I think this is going to be a phenomenal unit for the Blue Devils. They're getting back one of the top corners in the country. Chandler Rivers coming off 2 straight, very elite seasons in coverage. Really took his game to another level this past season, though. Kamari Robinson was the top rotational corner. He was pretty good in coverage. Wonder how he'll certainly hone to a full load, though. Fonte Floyd, Musa Kane barely saw the field last year. They're going to back them up, though. Safety group returns an elite starter of their own in Terry Moore, who, like Rivers, is a 4th-year senior. He's been coached by some of the best. Mike Elko really coached these guys up originally. Diaz showed up last year to help put some more touching on them. Moore, he was great in coverage. 10 plays on the ball, was phenomenal versus the run as well. Deshaun Stone had nearly 500 snaps, and was below average, but he got on the field plenty as a redshirt freshman. Picked up a dominant player in Caleb Weaver from Sam Houston, who was great in all regards this past year. He's been a very consistent force in coverage in his 3 years. Star positions likely to be headlined by Jaden Francois, who was a versatile player at Utah State, was solid depth at position. It's limited across the board for Duke, so I think that's a very ideal addition. Again, great secondary, one of the nation's best due to the elite players they have. Second year in this system, I think will even pay bigger dividends for everybody across the board. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I love this secondary. The best part of this defense, one of the best in the ACC, if not the best secondary unit in the ACC. This is a great unit. It starts with Terry Moore, who was really good last year. 71 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, a sack, 4 picks, and 6 pass breakups. Really good numbers from him. Deshaun Stone was solid as well at safety. 55 total tackles, a tackle for loss, and a pick for him. He was really good. A guy that was physically a solid, really good in pass defense and good at run defense. Chandler Rivers, 54 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, a sack, 3 picks, including a pick 6 in there, and 8 pass breakups. He had really good production. A really great corner. Obviously, when you return a guy like him, that's a great leader to have. I think Chandler Rivers will play phenomenal this year for this team. Kamari Robinson, he was good in his limited reps. Curious to see how he progresses in a full-time role. 23 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss for him. He's a really solid player with 4 pass breakups in addition. Vontae Floyd was okay in reps, 8 total tackles for him, 1 pass breakup. Not really a great performance, but hopefully they get a little bit more out of him. He was a true freshman, so there is some high upside there. Francois coming over from Utah State's a very interesting add. 51 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 2 pass breakups, and a pick last year. They're hoping he can continue to transition. And then Caleb Weaver is the guy I'm really excited for adding in the secondary. He comes over from Sam Houston State. 97 total tackles last year, 2.5 tackles for loss, 4 picks, 6 pass breakups, and a QB hurry. He was all over the place for that Sam Houston defense, a really strong asset out of the portal. I like what he can do. He's a veteran that's been around the game for a while. A really good add that caps off a really strong secondary.
Looking at the defensive verdict, this defense is great. Elko coached most of these guys up, left them for another defensive ace to fine-tune, as Diaz really allowed some of them to step up and thrive, especially up front. This defense will only be better in 2025 at all 3 phases. I think linebacking depth and more playmakers on the interior defensive line might be the negatives to focus on, but at full strength, there's playmakers galore on this group. I know last year, SMU, Miami, Ole Miss, the tougher offenses really had their way with this group, but under Elko, Nick, after they finally were able to really implement that scheme and they started to gain some experience into it, nobody was doing that to this defense. They were playing hardball against every top-tier opponent. There was not many people who could do much against them. And I think you're going to start to see that a little bit more in Manny Diaz's second year, where there's a lot of talent here, a lot of playmaking. I don't think the more elite offenses are just going to dog walk them like they did last year.
Yeah, I thought it was quite smart from the Duke Athletic Administration to hire another defensive-minded head coach to replace Mike Elko, bringing in Manny Diaz. I thought that was a really solid move to really kind of continue to bulk up and build that defensive pedigree that Duke has had. Sure, the defense wasn't as good as you may have hoped last year, 60 to 50s in most categories, 60th in points per game, 60th in rush yards per game, but I think they'll find a way to be massively improved and take a massive step forward. Manny Diaz is a great defensive coach, and I think he's got a really good unit here. I like what they have on the defensive line, a very deep unit with some solid players. I like what they have in the secondary. They added some key pieces there as well. They made some stuff happen there. I like the coaching in the secondary. The linebacking core is a little bit weak, and the depth is a bit concerning, but overall, I love what this defense can do. I think it's going to be an A+ defense come the end of the season.
Looking at the schedule and the prediction for Duke, the Blue Devils are going to be a force in the ACC. Might even see an early glimpse of that week 2 versus Illinois, another team people think can win 10 games this year. They have a great defense that has a pass rush, playmakers in the secondary. Offense should really take steps forward if Mensah and the offensive line he has to play with. This schedule is very manageable. The issue is they will end up in plenty of close games, I think, versus weaker teams. And that was a weekly theme for them last year, and they may have a bit of a skewed record because of it, because they were able to come on top of most of those games. They can beat every team on this slate, but they need to establish better consistency to avoid a flop. That certainly has me worried, Nick, is trying to gain some distance in your victories. That's the only issue with me. This schedule's easy, dude. I mean, they can literally go to Charlotte. I think Georgia Tech's a great opponent. That's going to be a very impressive win for them. At Clemson's, I think, a loss. Anyone else on the schedule, Nick, they can beat everyone. I know it seems not realistic they can go 11-1, but it's not that difficult. If they end up in Charlotte, I'm not going to be shocked one bit.
Yeah, the schedule plays out very favorably for Manny Diaz and company. I like what they have here. The non-conference is manageable, but very interesting. The Illinois game, you could potentially win that game. Some tough teams have come to Durham in recent years. Think Clemson, who lost in a game on opening weekend and lost down in Durham. So that's a tough place to play when that fan base is fully motivated. It's not just a basketball school, not just a basketball environment. So maybe Illinois finds themselves in trouble on September 6th if they don't play up to their full level. At Tulane is certainly an intriguing game. Darian Mensah playing against his former team on the road. At UConn is always interesting, especially the fact that it's in November. up in East Hartford. It's quite cold there. The wind will be blowing off the river. Certainly will be a little bit tougher there. I like the rest of the slate, though. I think it plays out quite favorably for them in the conference. I think they beat Georgia Tech. I have them beating North Carolina. That's my additional win to get the 9 wins. I think there'll be some issues with North Carolina come that part of the season. I'll talk about that in the North Carolina episode, of course, as always. I do think they lose to Syracuse, Clemson, Illinois as of right now, but they can pick off Syracuse in the Dome as well if all things go well and Syracuse is not firing on all cylinders. This is a very talented team. I think Mentz is an incredibly talented quarterback who will elevate under new coaching and new setup in the ACC. I think the wide receiver room has some good pieces to it. The O-line is phenomenal. I look at the defense, the D-line is absolutely phenomenal. The secondary is also absolutely phenomenal. 2 really incredible units there. Yes, the linebacking core may be a little bit weak in the depth, but still a good unit overall. I like what this team can do. I have them at 9 wins for a reason. I think the prospects are quite high on Duke. The schedule plays out quite favorably, and the energy around this team should be a good one for that reason. I like what this team can do. I'm buying in on Duke right now. My chips are on the table. I'm in on Duke. I think this is a phenomenal team. I'm excited to see how they play this year. I think big things are coming for the Blue Devils.
And, I think they're a better football team than Syracuse and North Carolina. I picked them to lose those tough road games because, again, I think they'll play some close ones this year. And Illinois, they match up quite well. Illinois doesn't really have any receivers. Their defensive line's kind of weak. I mean, these are very favorable matchups for Duke. I think come week 2, I'm going to flip-flop on that pick. It's almost a sure thing of that. So 8-9 wins for me. Again, the schedule is very easy. I really think they can run the table. So this will be a fun team to watch. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.